My name is Tim Carter. I'm the Director of Operations for Core Missions. I believe many people forget about the ministry of the national pastor while here in the United States. Oftentimes they're overlooked or forgotten in their efforts and desires to do what God has called them to do. What makes these nationals unique is their ability to reach their own people so much easier than the American missionary. You see, they already know the culture, they already know the language, and oftentimes they require just a few $100s a month to be fully supported. Something else that makes them unique is their ability to get into places that we can't get to. A lot of the national pastors we work with are in countries that you and I cannot access as Christians or be missionaries to. Other national pastors are in remote areas so far removed from civilization that you and I would not even know that there's a place there or that there's a village there, but these guys know because they're from that area. We depend on national pastors and national missionaries to reach these countries because it's the only way that we're able to get the gospel into these countries. And if we believe that everyone needs the gospel, then these national pastors are the only way that we're going to be able to get the gospel to these countries. Some of the difficulties and challenges these national pastors have is the lack of education, the lack of training. Another difficulty they face oftentimes is the lack of financial assistance, the ability to just focus solely on planting the church, or the ability to focus just solely on what God has called them to do. I think we forget many times the challenges that national pastors face is because we don't see them, we don't interact with them, and oftentimes we don't hear from them. They're not in front of us on a very periodic basis. And that's why I joined Core Missions. You see, Core Missions is uniquely equipped to help these national pastors. And not only do they have processes in place to be able to go visit, interview, applications, and different processes in place to make sure we're dealing with qualified national pastors who are doctrinally sound, but they also have the accountability in place to make sure that everyone is held accountable, not just the national pastor, but everyone involved with Core Missions. Core is also uniquely equipped to handle this because these national pastors can't come to the United States to raise funds for themselves. It would be so expensive for them to come to try and live, to try and learn the language, to try and get into these churches in the United States. So we develop relationships with churches and with ministries and present the needs on behalf of these national pastors. Core Missions is going to these churches to raise funds for these national pastors on behalf of the national pastors. It's much more affordable for myself or other partners with Core to raise funds for these national pastors, many pastors all at one time, than it is for each pastor to come from their home country to the United States to raise their own support. God led me to Core once I realized and was able to see the impact that national pastors can have in their own communities, the financial feasibility of supporting many national pastors for the place of just one missionary. Oftentimes we can support between 20 and 30 national pastors for the cost of supporting one American missionary. I have seen God work through Core in many miraculous ways. Not only have we been able to raise an abundant amount of support for these national pastors and see church plants after church plants being established, we're able to see pastors reaching people of different faiths. We're able to see national pastors reaching people that you and I could not reach. Right now, I'm currently on the ground in Egypt, and there are only approximately 30 Baptist pastors in Egypt, a country in which is restricted access for Americans at the moment. Since I've been here, I've been traveling to Alexandria, to Cairo, different parts of the area, meeting with national pastors, interviewing national pastors, getting applications from national pastors, making sure they're doctrinally sound, so that we can go back to the States, so that I can go back to the States and raise support for them, so that they can focus solely on church planting, solely focus on what God has called them to do here in Egypt, where there's such a great need. Some of the challenges the Egyptian pastors here that I've been talking with have had is the lack of financial assistance, the inability to go find a part-time job. You see, Egypt is a 90% Muslim country, and so it's very difficult for anyone who's not Muslim to get a job. I envision Core being in many more countries than we're currently in. I envision us entering into more restricted access countries, being in more closed countries where it's difficult for American missionaries to present the gospel, and in many remote areas where it's difficult for Americans to go. We're also currently working on establishing Bible institutes in the Philippines and hopefully in many other areas to help train these national pastors where often the missionaries have already left or there's no good place for them to be trained. Pray for my wife and I as we serve with Core Missions. My wife and I are both active in the ministry. My wife handles some of the finances and oversees all of our accountability coordinators and helps in that area. And then pray for myself as we interview these national pastors, as we travel around the world, as we meet these pastors and make sure we can accurately represent them to American churches, make sure they're doctrinally sound. We want to make sure when we go to these churches in America and have meetings with pastors that we are accurately representing the pastors that we work with. Second, consider joining my wife and I. Consider partnering with us financially. And also third, consider partnering with the national pastor so that they can reach the people that God has called them to. I'm excited about it, and I can't wait to see what God is going to do through the churches in America and through core missions as we partner with these national pastors all around the world.